The Business of Esports podcast is brought to you by G Fuel, the official energy drink of esports and the original energy formula of gaming. Visit them online at gfuel.com.
Welcome to the Business of Esports podcast, where we explore the intersection of business and esports, the fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation. Please welcome your hosts, Arda Okal, William Collis, and Paul Dawalibi. The Business of Esports podcast begins now.
From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. Detailed analysis, information, and opinion on the power, money, and decisions of gaming and esports. Thank you very much for tuning in. My name is Arda Okal. Alongside me is Paul Dawalibi. William Collis could not join us on this podcast. That is my fault. I was traveling on the day we normally tape the podcast, I should say. So just blame me. Throw all of your vitriol and your trolling to at Biz Esports, but say it's my fault, because it definitely is my fault. But do follow us on social media and visit our website, thebusinessofesports.com, and please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. When you leave a 5-star rating and a favorable review, it helps others like yourselves with interests in business, in esports, and the intersection of the business of esports find this podcast. Paul, I'm pretty sure we're going to have to spend the next 2.5 hours talking about the hottest topic in all of gaming, which will remain the hottest topic in all of gaming for the next year, and that is Tetris 99, my friend.
Apex Legends, right? Oh, sorry.
We
should
the
have
other,
that.
the most important battle royale game. I am hooked on this game. I am absolutely hooked. I love it. I play it every day. And I'm just so happy that it has basically become the Battle Royale meme. And I could care less. I'm like, this is the best thing ever.
I'm totally shaking my head. People can't see it, unfortunately. But, I mean, whatever floats your boat, Arda. It is an esport. Let's be clear.
Yes.
I am not judging. It is a legitimate esport. It's competitive. But it's Tetris.
You know, I will say
it's
this.
It's still Tetris.
It's Tetris, and Tetris is the perfect puzzle game. No one can tell me differently. I will debate this to the death. But I will say this. So I also, as many people might know, I also am involved with the Classic Tetris World Championship, which you could really classify as the most popular retro esport out there. They do it once a year. The numbers are gangbusters on YouTube. Look it up, /Classic Tetris on YouTube, at the CTWC on Twitter. But I will say that there has been a noticeable increase in discovering the CTWC as a result of Tetris 99, because as soon as Tetris 99 dropped, people were thinking, wow, this is like a Tetris esport. I wonder if that exists. And suddenly people found the CTWC, which was really cool.
I mean, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Here's and I know we're kind of, I know you're not joking. I'm kind of joking about it. But should we be releasing, should I have guys working on a Sudoku Battle Royale?
Totally, 100%. Everything should be a battle royale. I bet you if every single game, if every single puzzle released some sort of battle royale, people would be into it. I honestly feel like that with the zeitgeist the way that it is, you could totally cash in. Words with Friends battle royale. Where's that? I'm not kidding. I think that totally people would get into it.
I mean,
find a way to make Scrabble across 100 people.
If you've ever played Scrabble at my house, it is Battle Royale in the truest sense.
Let me ask you this, though. That Tetris 99 announcement was part of a larger Nintendo Direct, and I felt like that was one of the stronger Nintendo Directs that they have had. It felt like your favorite band going on stage and playing all the hits. Because we got a Super Mario announcement. Mario Maker 2 is coming. We got a Zelda announcement. Link's Awakening is being re-released on the Switch. We got a Tetris title, which was available for free the same day download. And then we got some other cool announcements, upgrades to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, etc. So what did you make of just the Nintendo Direct and where they're going in 2019?
Look, I'm not the same kind of Nintendo fanboy as you are. The interesting part of that whole announcement for me was I actually think Tetris 99, more importantly for Nintendo, is going to allow people to discover their Nintendo Online offering. That most people just either, my brother owns a Switch, and when I told him about Tetris 99, he goes, "Oh, is it free?" I said, "Yeah, but you got to have the Nintendo Online subscription." He goes, "Oh, what's that?" Right? I think there's a lot of people who play Nintendo and have a Switch that just don't even know about Nintendo's online offering, and this is one way to get people on board with that And I think for that reason, it'll be quite successful.
And I already had it because I love the retro titles. They release like 4 Nintendo games a month. I'm sure they're going to do a lot more. But anyway, if you want to continue that conversation, follow us online at Biz Esports. And also, if there's any topic that we do not cover on this podcast that you want us to, that you want Paul's opinion on, feel free to tweet us and let us know. Yell at us there. Say, hey, how come you didn't cover this? What we will cover is an event that you and I were both at last week, and that was the NYXL viewing party for week 1 of the Overwatch League. It was at 4040 Club in Manhattan. The lineup was around the block. Super
crazy.
impressive as soon as you got there. Lots of passionate fans packed into this venue. Lots of heavy hitters too. There were a lot of CEOs walking around, a lot of people in the executive suites that were, taking this opportunity to network and meet other people and also talk with fans. I saw that happening a lot. But just from your vantage point, I mean, week 1 of Overwatch League is in the books. We saw viewing parties like this. This was very much, to me, a local success. But what did you notice from it?
I had been telling some of the ownership at the NYXL that local engagement was the absolute key to victory for these teams right now. That if they don't engage the local audience, and I've said on this podcast more than a few times that you need personalities on the team, you need characters on the team to try and help engage that local audience. But events like this go a really long way. And I think what we saw with a lineup around the block is really proof that there is huge demand for this kind of experience, for this kind of product. I don't even think it had to have been Overwatch. I think if you put anything kind of gaming, esports together, you would have had this kind of local engagement. These kinds of local events there aren't enough of in esports. And I think this was the proof. I didn't need the proof, but I think the proof a lot of people needed to really get excited about local experiences for esports.
What I found interesting was not only did people show up for the NYXL game, they were the second game on the docket. There was a game before them. I think it was the rematch of the finals, of Spitfire and Fusion. And people showed up. And they were there early.
It's the social event.
Right.
It's the social experience. No one...
So no surprise they showed up early for a team they don't necessarily support.
Because I don't even think it was really about the Overwatch League match. I think that was a good excuse for a bunch of like-minded people who share a similar passion to get together. And that's the part that sells. That's the part that gets people excited. That's why there's a lineup around the block. Mm-hmm. They could just as easily have watched the matches from home. Why would they trudge out in the middle of New York City and wait in the line outside? It's because the shared experience, that social experience, is so compelling.
Well, not as many people did watch it at home. As we look at the Twitch numbers for Overwatch League Week 1, the average Twitch viewership was actually down from this time last year. There were more hours watched overall, but also more games on the day. But average concurrent viewership was at 188,000, which is down from this time last year at 237,600. Now, when you look at these numbers, is that at all? I know that you have been a little bit critical of the Overwatch League as we get into Season 2, but are these numbers concerning at all?
Arda, let me ask you a question first. Are you surprised? Are you surprised at this?
I don't think that this is a five bell alarm concern at all. I mean, viewership is down across a lot of forms of entertainment, right? Yeah, it's a lower number, but at the same time, I don't see it as a pressing the panic button just yet.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I don't think this is cause for panic, but I would hope that at the Activision Blizzard level, at the Overwatch League level, even at the team level, there are questions being asked why. Why is this the case, right? And you could argue the number of hours watched were higher. The problem is there were more games because there are more teams. So that number is a little bit misleading.
Maybe longer hours too, like maybe
the matches went longer. They did go longer. A lot of them went longer. And one of the reasons they went longer is I think one of the reasons why the viewership is down. And that is the meta in Overwatch has never been so boring to watch.
GOATS is boring, is what you're saying.
The 3-3 is boring. And the irony of their new spectator tools, I think the beauty of those tools being inside the eyes of one player is you can see the incredible mechanical skill of that player in real time, right? I'm seeing the flicks, I'm seeing the headshots, I'm seeing the crazy moves that these guys are making.
Right.
If you take out that DPS role and you have just tanks and support, you're left with not only a pretty boring match, but that very special spectator tool you've given people is now not that compelling at all. It's not compelling at all. Yeah, okay, great. I can see a guy holding up his shield for 20 minutes in a match. It's not that exciting to watch, unfortunately. And some of the players have actually come out and said, look, these matches were close because of GOATs. Because GOATs basically eliminates the benefit of huge mechanical skill, because otherwise the Koreans would be running away with things. And GOATs levels the playing field to a point where all these matches have been very close.
So that's the thing, though. I mean, one of the prevalent topics in esports for decades has been the fact that South Korea is leaps and bounds above every other country in the world.
In mechanical skill, yeah.
Yes. Now, here we find a situation where in one of the top leagues in esports in the entire world, we have a little bit more parity on the horizon. But it is at the expense, perhaps, of the entertainment value of the games themselves. So which one, in your opinion, at this point is more important? If you're Activision Blizzard, are you actively thinking of changing something, of introducing a tuner that will essentially completely change the meta?
Well, if my numbers are down still in week 2, year over year, I think you'd be stupid if you're not making changes at Activision or Blizzard specifically. Why? Like, how could you make the argument that things are going well if 1 year later, with more money, more sponsors, more teams, more, and yet people seem to care less about it? Something's wrong. Something's wrong. They will have to face that music at some point. They cannot just keep having lower viewership numbers week to week, year over year, and get away with it. And maybe they don't want to admit that the game is pretty bad, in a pretty bad state right now. Maybe that's something they're not willing to admit. But that's the downfall of Overwatch League, if there is any, because everything else is smart. The way it's structured, the teams, everything they're doing, the sponsors, everything they're doing is really pretty top notch. What they've ignored is the game is not that fun to play, and it's becoming not that fun to watch.
Well, I will say that this is definitely a fixable issue if it gets
Very
escalated
fixable
to that point. So maybe we will see that as it goes along, and we will be talking about it on a future episode. What we will get to now is exactly what you foreshadowed there. The format, of course, of the Overwatch League eventually will go to a home-and-home system, and it is a franchise-based system. And we should note that from Season 1 to Season 2, the franchise fee has doubled. So from that end, very much a success. Now, another Activision Blizzard property.
Well, success for Blizzard. Let's be clear.
Success for Blizzard, right? But still a successful business venture.
For the owners, that remains to be seen, right? They've just paid a higher price for something. We don't know if that investment,
unless you were in Season 1, you just doubled your investment in a year.
On paper.
On paper. Well, another league that will be adopting this format is the Call of Duty League. They will launch a city-based franchise league. There has been a job posting, in fact, for a brand manager that, quote, will be the steward of the Call of Duty World League brand and will help manage the look and feel of the Call of Duty World League with franchise owners, broadcasters, and other external partners. That's according to the job posting that is still up there. I think it's on Hitmarker, I should say, pardon me, if you want to find it. So it seems like this has been adopted as the successful esports league model. And I wonder if this is just going to become the norm and we're just going to see it. Every league will adopt it. The ones moving forward in being introduced will just adopt it, and this is what it's going to be.
Especially for properties as big as Call of Duty, right? That can support these kind of city-based franchised leagues. When with Call of Duty, I mean, you have a IP there that is incredibly valuable. That's a brand that's extremely well known. I don't know if franchise leagues, city-based leagues will work for every esport, but for the big ones, this definitely seems to be the way that is most compelling and most palatable for sponsors. Most importantly, I think what Blizzard has realized is it's much easier to draw big-name sponsors to their league, to Overwatch League, because it's so familiar. There's a reason, other than I'm sure their marketing and sales team are very good, but I think the reason you're getting so many big name sponsors like T-Mobile and State Farm and Toyota
Coca-Cola.
And all these guys, Coca-Cola, is because it's so easy for them to understand. It feels and looks just like normal sports. And taking Call of Duty in that direction makes total sense. They can leverage everything they've learned with Overwatch League. I'm sure there's a lot of overlap of people that were doing stuff for Overwatch League that can now do the similar work for Call of Duty to set this up. There's a lot of shared learning that they can benefit from, and I think it makes total sense. But just going back to Overwatch League for a second, I'd be curious to see if the teams in the new Call of Duty League learn anything from the Overwatch League teams. And specifically, I'm referring to, and I'll pat myself on the back on this one. A few weeks, I'm not sure what episode it was, but we talked on a previous episode about characters driving more dollars for teams as opposed to having the very best players, right? That a guy from Korea who speaks no English but is a great player may not be the ideal person on your team because he just doesn't engage well with the fans and the community. And if you look at Overwatch League after week 1, it's interesting on Twitch. You can track how many bits are cheered towards a specific team. And if you look at just the top 3 teams, in first place, you have the Atlanta Reign.
Strong start for them.
Strong start for them, but more importantly, they have Defran, a character, a big character, Twitch personality, streamer, a guy very somewhat outspoken but controversial at some points. The guy is a character, and that drives attention, and it drove dollars to that team. Number 2, the Spark, Hangzhou Spark. Interesting. Nothing particularly special about that team. Also, a good roster of players. But I think the reason is their logo, their branding is all pink. And so they're getting the majority, I think, of the female viewership, or at least...
You think it's as simple as that?
I think it's so different. Maybe it's not just female viewership, but because I love the colors too. It's a question of it's so different from the other aggressive kind of gamer branding. It's like it's almost a breath of fresh air from a branding perspective.
I can buy it from that, but I don't know if I buy into the gender part of it, but definitely maybe the look of the logo as opposed to other ones. Because what I have noticed in esports, a lot of colors are used over and over again.
Yeah,
there's a lot of
you get a lot of reds and blacks.
Yeah, like I love it when there's different color palettes being used. That attracts me more, and maybe it's a subconscious thing. Maybe this is a psychology experiment, but like I would be more inclined to maybe pay a couple seconds extra attention to something if it was a favorable color scheme in my mind.
I agree, but look at what Razer has.
We're going off the rails on.
It's okay. I think
esports,
it's interesting because Razer has just come out with a bunch of peripherals and laptops and accessories, all in a color they call, I think, rose quartz or something like that, like a pinkish color.
Okay.
Because they realize the female gamer market is underserved. And I don't know if pink is the way to serve it, but clearly someone has done research there that says this is what that market is interested in buying. But I think the breath of fresh air in their branding and that pink color, that very vibrant pink color, is what's attracting attention. Those two, Atlanta and the Reign and the Spark, in first and second place, literally have twice as much bits cheered as the third place, which is New York. And arguably New York has one of the best teams, has arguably the biggest market, the richest market. And it's half of both either the Spark or the Reign, which I think speaks to the power of branding on any team more than player skill, and the power of characters and personalities more so than player skill.
How many teams... Imagine an esports landscape where there are multiple city-based leagues. I wonder what the saturation point will be, because when I think of Overwatch League and the home and home games, I'm not thinking they're filling Madison Square Garden. As great as that would be, I don't think that's happening on a weekly basis, at least in 2020. Maybe one day. But for me, I'm thinking, okay, maybe 500 people, maybe 1,000 people if we're getting ambitious here. But at what point are we going to see 7 or 8 leagues in the same city playing on a weekly, bi-monthly, monthly basis? Or bi-weekly, I should say.
I think that's only sustainable when you really start poaching dollars and viewership from traditional sports, right? If you think about it, if all of the viewership and the dollars move away from traditional sports into esports, it's not that hard to think. I mean, how many professional sports teams do we have in New York today?
Several. We have 2 MLB teams.
Okay.
We have 3 NHL teams. We have
It's 5.
2 NFL teams.
7.
We have 2 MLS teams, and not to mention all the other leagues.
So you're talking like 9, 10 teams, something like that, right?
At least, yeah.
At least. Why is it hard to think we could have 9 or 10 esports leagues if you're poaching viewership and talent from all of those leagues?
But all those, and those are at the very top, right? Those are the there's 8 or whatever it is in the Mega 4. I'm not saying that esports is not there to compete with that yet, but globally they are. Regionally in America, maybe not today. In terms of
it's inevitable, I think, Arda.
Okay.
It's inevitable.
Eventually, yes. But if we get to the point where people are ready for that, but then there are suddenly 15 to 20 different options that they can watch in their city, are we going to get to the point where that saturation will divide the audience? Or is there going to be enough interest such that one esports fan in New York will attend 6 or 7 different events? And then if that's the case, well, how much money is that going to cost them?
I think you're going to get what you have in traditional sports today, which is you'll have 10 big leagues like Overwatch and Call of Duty and League of Legends or whatever else. And then you'll have a bunch of more niche leagues that appeal to a niche audience that don't need to fill Madison Square Garden, but can fill 500 or 1,000 people quite easily and be very happy.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe the theater at the
That's
Garden.
it, right?
Okay.
And so I think it's an inevitability that will happen, and I absolutely believe that cities can support it.
Do you agree or disagree with us? Follow us on Twitter. Send us some tweets at BizEsports. Also go to thebusinessofelsports.com. Every day you will see multiple links that get you caught up on the world of the business of esports. Let's talk about a game that you have been playing a whole lot. Not the number 1 Battle Royale game that I'm playing.
The number 2, right?
The number 2, the distant number 2, shall I say. Another record broken, I should say, for Apex Legends over Fortnite. This is via an article on Gaming Bolt. Twitch tracker Gamo Loco reports on Twitter that Apex Legends was viewed for a cumulative 8.4 million hours on February 12th. This beats the previous recorded high of 7.2 million hours viewed on Twitch in a single day that was set by Fortnite during its Season 5 launch last year. Gamo Loco attributes the incredible viewership on February 12th on Respawn's Twitch Rivals event, which was held on that day. And we know that there will be future Twitch Rivals events involving Apex Legends as well. You have really played this game at length in the last little while. So based off of your experience and what you know of the game and the esports landscape, what are your thoughts on its future today?
Look, my belief is this is a really good game. It's a really well done game. And I've been playing it a lot. And I think I talked about this on the last podcast quite a bit, so I won't rehash it here, but it fixes so many of the issues with the Battle Royale genre in general and things that PUBG and Fortnite and all these guys didn't do. And it makes it really fun and fast-paced and exciting to play. It's the kind of game you can sit in front of and burn 8 hours playing it, and it feels like 5 minutes have passed. And the numbers back that up. The player numbers back it up. The viewership numbers on Twitch back it up. There are streamers doing record number of subscriptions like Shroud and Tim the Tatman, who, by the way, I also said was going to have a record year, and he is.
Already on a good pace is Tim the Tatman.
And
by the way, Dr. Disrespect, speaking of streamers, did say that Fortnite is dead. Might have said it half jokingly, but he did say it.
I don't think it's dead. The issue, the beauty of Apex is it appeals to the exact kind of audience you want to have as an esport. It skews a bit older, and therefore it skews a bit richer, right? You have some more disposable income. You're not relying on a 10-year-old who needs to ask his mom to buy something. Most of the players here can just buy skins when they want, however many they want. So you have an audience immediately with more disposable income and more able to spend money on your game. I think that any of those people who were playing Fortnite before have already moved to Apex.
So here to expound on that, I think you're onto something there. You could see a future where Apex becomes, based on its gameplay, based on its structure, based on the way that it unfolds, the squad system, etc. You could see Apex Legends being the premier battle royale esport in the future, whereas Fortnite maybe doesn't necessarily care as much about the esports realm and becomes more of a casual community kind of, almost like a hangout.
It's funny you say that, Arda, because I've said many times on this podcast and on the blog that Fortnite would fail as an esport. And the irony of it is, I think not only was I spectacularly right here, but
we were wrong. Yes,
but
we also didn't know that Apex Legends was coming, to be fair.
But they will not frame it as abandoning esports.
Okay,
I think Fortnite will not take the loss on this one. They will instead say, we're a platform, right? We're a platform for a certain group of people who love this game to get together, socialize, watch concerts, do cool things, play events. It becomes more of a social, casual gaming experience.
Yes.
And a platform for an entire demographic to connect.
And maybe it's not the elite esports offering. However, I do feel like, just to go back to the previous podcast and the point I made about Fortnite esports, as long as there's prize money to be had and as long as there's interest, which I don't think either of those things will go away from Fortnite. I think that enough people are Fortnite loyal, or they love the game to the point where they wouldn't mind at all watching competition play in that game. And I do think that we will see a lot of the elite players bounce back and forth and compete in both, especially if the prize money was worth it. But I do feel like it's going to be a part of their offering to the overall community. Hey, this week there's a Marshmello concert. Next week there's a Fortnite esports competition. The week after that, we have Kevin Hart doing comedy at Tilted Towers or whatever.
I think my prediction was spot on, that Fortnite becomes more of a social network and not an esport, because it was never built with competitive esports in mind, and it shows in the mechanics of the game. And it's hard to just get away from that. It's hard to just say, here's $100 million, now we're an esport. No amount of money can make a game, can will an esport into existence and make it sustainable. But Fortnite is not going anywhere anytime soon. The bigger losers, I think, are some of the Fortnite streamers who have their brand so attached to Fortnite that potentially they lose a big swath of their viewership. And you're seeing it with Ninja. Ninja's a great player. Great Apex Legends player too, right? Like, it's not like he's not good at Apex Legends. But his brand is so tied to Fortnite that the second he goes and plays something other than Fortnite, he loses some of his audience. And it's not clear if the Apex audience will embrace him in that world, because they see him so much as a Fortnite streamer. And if you look at the sort of the numbers, you have guys like Shroud, even Tim the Tatman, and I think on some days even Doc, who are putting up bigger numbers than Ninja.
Because of Apex Legends. Now, do you think that's going to be sustainable 3 months from now? Will those numbers taper off, and will Fortnite resume being the king of the mountain in terms of Twitch viewership?
No.
You don't think so?
No. I think it's a great lesson for these huge personalities in that world that you can't tie your brand to any one game. It seems like the easy thing to do, right? Fortnite is going up and to the right. If I just hitch my wagon to that, I'm going to go up and to the right. If the issue is, if you're so tied to one thing, what happens when it stops going up and to the right? And I think there's an interesting lesson there, and we'll see how it plays out with Ninja. You know, Ninja's not going anywhere anytime soon either. He's got still a massive audience.
Pretty sure he's fine.
And a massive brand and huge power in the industry. But I think this will hurt him. I think Apex Legends is hurting him.
Well, what's not going to hurt him is the fact that he has his own line of toys coming out. I actually saw this by mistake. I guess you should put mistake in quotation marks. I had a chance to go to the New York Toy Fair, this past weekend, and I was walking around on the floor, and I happened to go into an area where I suppose was restricted, but the door was open, and I walked
there
on
signs,
in.
Arda?
No, there were no signs that say "Do not enter." They were just having meetings. It was a B2B conference, first of all. So I was just there creating content. They invited me to come, so I was creating content for Instagram, whatever. I walk in, and I see a whole wall of Ninja toys. And I was like, oh, that's cool. It's a great idea. And then suddenly this guy walks up, must be an executive or something. He's like, can I help you? Do you have a meeting? And I was like, nope, don't have a meeting. I just wanted to check around. That's pretty cool. He's like, yeah, that's great. Listen, you didn't see this. And I was like, all right, I didn't see it. Let me just put it on my gram for a second here. Like, come on, dude. Anyway, from Esports, Lamo, a specific toy line, has a set of different vinyl figures, all fashioned after streamers. It's not only going to be Ninja, in fact, it's going to be Dr. Disrespect, Tim the Tatman, your boy, Lyric, Summit. Besides vinyl figurines, there will be plushies, games, and other types of merchandise. There will also be mobile and video game releases that interact with the toys, which will be very interesting to see how that works out. But I'm sure it's going to be very popular, particularly among the demographic that buys toys. So what I found interesting about this is I wonder now if we will see a world where streamer merchandise will outsell sports merchandise. Because streamers inherently building their own brands, very loyal fan base, will give them bits, will subscribe to their channels, will put as much money as they can afford to support their fellow streamers, including buying merchandise, which they really receive something collectible in return. So I wonder, will we see a month maybe where Ninja action figures outsell, let's say, I don't know, football action figures?
Absolutely. As esports rise and traditional sports stock falls, that's inevitable. I think the more interesting trend here is esports is following the pattern of virtually every other entertainment industry, where merchandising, and every time I say that, I hear Spaceballs in my head, where
we just dated ourselves.
We did just date ourselves.
We totally did. Great movie.
Where merchandising becomes the big driver of revenue. Disney makes more money off of toys than they do on movies. And so entertainment in general, whether it's sports or movies, a lot of it is driven by merchandising. A lot of it is driven by apparel. A lot of it is driven by all these kinds of things. And we're seeing the same trend here. For Ninja to get on this very quickly, I think is extremely smart of him. Very, very smart of him. And I think he will benefit tremendously from the kind of brand exposure, because a toy, you don't have to necessarily watch Ninja on Twitch to buy his toy. It'll bring him to an entirely new audience potentially, and blow up his brand in a very big way.
One other toy related note I thought was interesting was, so Nerf, Hasbro, has a line of Fortnite toys, right?
I mean, this is
Fortnite
purely
branded toys.
like market research, great market research on Nerf's part, right? They said, who's our core audience?
Oh, totally.
Who's our core demographic user of Nerf products? Where can we target that demographic as efficiently as possible, as cost effectively as possible? I can't see a better place than Fortnite.
Brilliant.
It's brilliant.
Yes. The reason I'm bringing it up, though, is because Hasbro has partnered with TSM, okay, separately from the Fortnite toys. They've partnered with TSM to lead the promotional effort for its line of licensed Fortnite blasters. So TSM's competitive team will appear in international and linear commercials for the Fortnite toys. And TSM negotiated directly with Hasbro, which paid a sponsorship fee for TSM's involvement, separate from its licensing deal with Fortnite publisher Epic Games. So I thought it was interesting that not only is there a deal with Fortnite to brand these toys, but now we're getting it's the extra layer. It's almost like getting the celebrity to come and endorse the product. Now we're getting the players, the streamers, the professional esports competitors that play this game to now endorse the product through commercials.
And I'll tell you why this is so smart on TSM's part. Again, they're reaching the young audience, and that's massively valuable for these esports team brands. Because when you become loyal to a team, right? I shouldn't say I grew up, because I was quite a bit older when this started, but when I was watching Counter-Strike quite religiously, Cloud9 was kind of the team I followed. And from then on, I've been a Cloud9 fan in everything, right? Like if Cloud9's competing, even though I don't follow League of Legends, if they're competing in League of Legends, chances are I will cheer for them. I will support them more than any other team because my loyalty now is to the Cloud9 brand. And so many of these esports organizations are trying to create that kind of power in their brand so that regardless of the game they're playing, people are attracted to their brand. And TSM partnering with Hasbro and Fortnite and this kind of mix of toy and team and game, I think is extremely powerful for them to reach that younger audience, reach it effectively, and build loyalty in the TSM team brand.
Yes. We're definitely going to see a lot more of this through other...
Toys are going to be massive.
Absolutely.
Toys, I mean, we're already seeing it with apparel, but the merchandising around esports is still massively untapped.
That fair, the toy fair itself, and this was just one toy fair on one weekend in the calendar year, was enormous. Like, yes, we can all visualize the idea that the toy industry is pretty big because maybe people listening to this have children and they're buying a bunch of toys for their kids. But man, it was madness. It was like, this is, even to your expectations, it's impressive how large this industry is.
Because it's not even for a younger audience, right? Like, you see collectibles targeted at an older audience that still are huge business, huge drivers of dollars.
Totally. Let's go quick on these last two topics here. One of them is, and this is going to be one of those like, what should we add about this? But it's important to note this because maybe there's some people listening to this podcast who are executives, or maybe they work in marketing departments spending advertising dollars on video games, and maybe they have this sort of reservation. So this would be important for them to hear. So a new study finds no link between violence in real life and video games. According to a study from the Oxford Internet Institute, these are notes from comicbook.com, they reported on this. The Oxford Internet Institute, their latest study, there is no link between time spent playing violent video games, quote violent, and an increase in aggressive behavior in teens. The study was published in the Royal Society Open Science this week and is described by the prestigious University of Oxford as one of the most definitive studies on the topic to date. According to a member of the research team, quote, the idea that violent video games drive real-world aggression is a popular one, but it hasn't tested well over time. Our findings suggest that researcher biases might have influenced previous studies on this topic and have distorted our understanding of the effects of video games. And if you want to learn more about this study, check it out online, Oxford Internet Institute. So, yes, we've seen these kind of results before. We know this because we are in the video game space, but is it still important to get this, like to get on a loudspeaker and say this as loudly as possible? Because maybe some advertising dollars are still not making their way to video games because of stuff like this.
Totally agree. And there was a minister, I think, in Germany at one point who said they don't want esports in the country because it's too violent. I think the NCAA said
the Olympics
it's too violent. The Olympics, right? Like there's still a lot of people in very high positions, very smart people who think these two things are connected, violence and video games. And it's unfortunate. So these studies are great to dispel those myths. But I think most unfortunate is that even these studies will fail to convince some of these people. That there's a group of people who just love to demonize entertainment, pop culture, whatever is hot in the moment, because it's just so easy to blame. It's so easy to blame. And at one point it was rap music or hip hop, and at one point it was TV that was rotting our brains, and you could literally point to every form of entertainment. At some point there were some people somewhere that blamed it for violence or corrupting our youth or doing bad things to society.
I do maintain that video did, in fact, kill the radio star. I just want to point that out. That's
good. We have that
accurate.
On the record. 100%
yes,
accurate.
100% accurate. So what would you, from your dealings with business executives, talking about money, talking about where marketing dollars go, and just talking about the video game industry in general, for a lot of executives, this is still new territory for them. They're not endemic, obviously, to this industry. There are a lot of people that are, but they're still learning about it. So how much of this do you encounter?
Remarkably not that much. because there's still a bigger hurdle in the education piece, which is this is not just 10 guys sitting in their basement, nerdy guys, and this is just their hobby. There's still, remarkably, that's the bigger hurdle still for a lot of executives, a lot of people outside of the esports industry to convince them that this is a real thing. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, the violence piece is not the biggest objection yet or today. It's still not the biggest hurdle. And I don't think it will ever be. I think once we get people over the hurdle of, hey, this is real, it's huge, people are taking this very seriously. Once we get them over that hurdle, the violence piece hopefully solves itself. Like at that point, once it's mainstream accepted, it's harder to demonize.
I will say this, gone are the days of Mortal Kombat and the ESRB.
Yeah, but it's the perfect example, right? Like that's 10 years ago, more.
No, it was like in the 90s for sure.
Yeah,
I think it was
like
the first
20
Mortal
years
Kombat,
ago?
like
Yeah.
1993 or something like that. Yeah, the establishment of the video game rating system based off of Mortal Kombat's violence in the game.
Did you ever look at a rating on a video game before you bought it?
No.
Okay.
Of course not. I will say this though. Speaking of Mortal Kombat, I'm excited for Mortal Kombat 11, but man, doesn't it where we have come in terms of like fatalities and violence is hilarious. It's like comically ridiculously
over the top.
Oh my gosh. It's a comedy at this point. Like I'm laughing watching this. Like what is this? It's hilarious. I can't wait to play that game. That's gonna be fun. Last topic for us here. By the way, you can follow us on Twitter at BizEsports, thebusinessofesports.com. We have a full slate of links every day that you can get caught up on the business of esports. And please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. When you leave a 5-star rating and a favorable review, it helps us and also pushes the podcast, that behind the scenes algorithm that nobody knows the solution to. We do know, though, that other people will see it and maybe we'll get on some charts, which would be amazing. China will become the biggest country in esports, according to The Drum. China is set to overtake the United States as the highest earning esports country in 2019, according to, they pulled several data sources for this, Newzoo being one of the sources. The report, one of several reports, which combined market data from the last 20 years to predict the average winnings for the next 5 years, predicts esports earnings will continue to rise in 2019 as sports popularity increases. The sport's huge popularity in China will help bolster its earnings, with the country expected to make more than $45 million, a significant increase on the United States, which claimed $28 million in earnings in 2018 in the esports bubble alone, I guess in competitions, etc. So when you hear this, is this a concern at all? Like living in the United States, having events in the United States, is this a concern to you? Do you just think this tide will rise all boats, or will China poach large events as they continue to become an esports powerhouse?
Look, growth is growth. So I'm always a fan of growth for the industry as a whole. I don't care where it is, where it's coming from, what country it's happening in. Growth is good for everybody. The reality of this news piece or this research is, I just think it's so obvious. It's so incredibly obvious that China is going to be the esports powerhouse because they have more than three times the population of the US.
Sure.
Like you just have more players, so therefore more competitors, more talent, more viewers. The population, the larger population just inevitably is going to lead to a larger esports industry there. Will they poach big events and all these kinds of things? Maybe. The US is still going to be a massively valuable market, and sponsors, brands who want to be present in front of the American audience, esports audience, are still going to want to have events here and advertise here and do all those things here. So I don't think growth in China hurts the US at all. I think it helps us because more dollars in the pockets of the industry as a whole helps the entire industry move forward and innovate and do all kinds of great things. Like if I'm a company and I'm building something in the esports world, the fact that I have a huge market in the US and also a huge market in China that I can address is a great thing. It's a great thing.
I wonder also how much the esport fan complains that they can't go to a local event. I think that my hypothesis would be that they are very happy watching at home or having viewing parties. I feel like as long as there's a social component, and honestly, maybe Twitch chat even takes care of this, the fact that they can just interact and get that sort of feeling of community while they're sitting at home.
Nothing replaces the local events, Arda. Nothing. Why do people still go to music concerts?
We're talking about 10 million people just watch Marshmello.
I get it, but people are still going to watch live music.
Okay, yeah, fair.
Right? I have $2,000 headphones here and a sound system that will play the music better than any live concert, but people are still going to go to live concerts.
Until virtual reality gets so good that we can watch the concerts at home.
Maybe. But as human beings are social animals, and it will be hard to get rid of that live experience. Now, I'm not sure how China factors into that.
No, because just the fact that the events will be in China and
I don't think
at some point they will have the biggest muscles in esports.
But
right?
I don't think China will be cannibalizing. I think you'll just end up having the industries and the fan bases will be so large on both sides that they will both be able to support big events, right? Like, why can't you have a League of Legends championship in the US and in China, for example, right? At some point, it's so big that you could support two separate entities.
I see. China could get to a point where they're so big and they lead the market to the point where they say, actually, we want these championships to ourselves for the next 10 years.
Maybe.
That could happen.
It could.
And if they throw enough money at it, sure, what company would say no?
Right. If you're an NFL fan living in China, that's probably how you feel.
Yeah, but if there was enough interest in the NFL or whatever sport it is, they would just put a team. It's happened in women's hockey. There's literally a Chinese team in the CWHL. I mean, I'm saying, like, this could happen, right? Like, you could see situations where they become the number one.
But that's kind of my point, right?
Throwing money at it.
That even if China becomes the nexus of power in esports, and all of the big events go there, because that's where all the viewers and the dollars are, you're still gonna have pull from the US. That esports market in the US, the fan base in the US, is not gonna disappear just because China gets big. It will still be valuable enough to draw either teams or events or things like that to address that audience, which is valuable in its own right.
Fair enough. Let's end it there. If you have anything that you disagree with or agree with Paul, or if you're upset that William wasn't a part of it and you want to get mad at me, feel free to tweet us at Biz Esports. Totally my fault. Sorry, William. The three of us will be back next week. The podcast drops every single Thursday. Please also follow us on Instagram, by the way, at Biz Esports as well. We're trying to grow the Instagram, and so far, so good. I think we're at about 10 followers, but that's going to grow. We're going to blow it up is what's going to happen. It's going to blow up completely.
Like from 10 to 10,000 by the time this podcast comes out.
That's right.
So just ignore the 10 number.
Right, exactly. It's going to be in front of 3 zeros very, very soon. For Paul Dawalibi, my name is Arda Ocal. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Business of Esports podcast. Check us out at thebusinessofesports.com and on Twitter at BizEsports.